All right. Joining me is a very special person, a Republican by the name of Lauren Cottingham. I realize that might not have been the best introduction, but I wanted to introduce you the best the way that I could think of right at the moment. Lauren, welcome to the show.
Yeah, me excited to come on and talk about some recent developments in the GOP.
Yes, I mean, but tell me a bit about yourself, because of course you're more than just a Republican named Lauren Cottingham. You also have a lot more going on than that. So please tell me a bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I am a fifth generation Texan. I'm from Central Texas, spent most of my time in San Antonio, Austin area, did live in East Texas for a bit. I've been involved in politics since I was young, like 14 years old. I actually volunteered in 2004 for the Bush campaign. That's kind of where my politics got started. I graduated college and started pursuing a career in state politics. I worked for a number of state representatives, worked in the legislature, ended up working in political consulting after that, and the polling industry, and on the policy side of things. So kind of spent about 8 years doing that, all for Republicans. And so in 2020, I decided that I kind of just wanted a break, and I decided to go to law school. So I am a third-year law student, planning on graduating in May with my JD. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. I guess a lot kind of made me go to law school is a lot of it was the current political climate, and it was kind of hard to just maintain what I've been doing in the past with the current state of the Trump GOP. And so I was like, you know what, this is a headache. I'm going to go to law school. So anyways.
Yeah. Anyway, just a little fun fact. I guess I can say this now, but I actually applied for law school around the same time that you were, and I got a 155 on the LSAT, and did not get into any of the schools I wanted.
Oh, that's okay. The LSAT's so dumb. I wish that was not like standardized testing is like not, LSAT doesn't determine your law school, but that's an interesting fact for sure.
Yeah, I'm doing well. I just graduated with my master's in music and cognition, hoping to work as a music teacher or music therapist when I moved to Atlanta.
Very interesting. Yeah, music is cool.
Anyway, you've been I've looked at your Twitter feed. You've been in the fight for a better GOP. I'm just curious about what was the motivation behind that.
So I guess I've been a lifelong Republican myself, and I guess I believe in this limited government ideology. And after my 8 years of working in the industry, I just feel like our party is better than what Trump has to offer. And I feel like if you talk to the average Trump voter, it's a populism thing. They point the finger at conservatives, but we need to kind of get back to what conservatism actually means. I mean, we've gone completely astray, and we're following a leader rather than principles. And so I think any party, Democrat, Republican, you don't follow leaders, you don't follow people, you follow a set of principles and ideology. And so that's kind of one thing. I think I would say that I'm pretty supportive of what Liz Cheney and like Adam Kinzinger are doing right now. It's pretty hard to kind of step up for, what's right. And anyways, I'm not saying that all the Trump policies are bad, but me personally, I have not been supportive of the tactics that they're using, the rhetoric that's coming out of that. And it's just, it's created a very divisive political system. I believe in a system that, works with Democrats, works across the aisle. And, right now we're just not doing that. So. Right. I think we need reform within the party.
You mentioned Liz Cheney, and you might have also mentioned Adam Kinzinger. There is an inner Shoshana Weissman in me that would want to describe them as Bay and the Goat. And that leads us to, because of all their work they've been doing on the January 6th committee. I'm just curious if you've been watching that. Has that in any way changed your view about Donald Trump and whether he should be the leader of our party?
I would say that it's only gotten worse, my opinion of him. I kind of was not a huge fan to begin with, and kind of knowing people that have worked in the administration and close by, you kind of just see that people are leave him. Our former governor, Rick Perry, only could work with him for a couple of months and then he left. that's the kind of guy he is. So I guess it's kind of just solidified my opinion about
Was
him.
he really only there for a couple months?
Oh, maybe he was there for 6 months. I don't even think he was there for a year. I mean, you look at another one, Rex Tillerson was like, yeah, I can't work with this guy.
Oh
And,
yeah, he was
and
out
these are,
after a year.
yeah, I mean, I don't know, fact check me on that. I guess I don't know the exact dates off the top of my head, but so many people have done that. I think at first us as Republicans, back in 2016, I did vote for Trump, I will admit for that. And I just said, well, at least he'll hire the right people, was kind of the argument. Like, okay, well, he did hire the right people to begin with, but that just didn't really work out. He's just not an amenable person to work with. So,
okay, so we do have a fact check. Rick Perry served from March of 2017 until November of 2019.
Okay, sorry.
So a couple years. But anyway,
couple years didn't last.
I mean, this whole idea about principles versus personality. I should point out that there was a bit of breaking news overnight last night. In the UK, Boris Johnson is resigning as prime minister after after scandals, quite frankly, that are small potatoes compared to what Trump has been implicated in. And just yesterday, in my home country of Canada, there was a candidate for the Conservative Party leadership who has been credibly accused of sexual harassment. His name is Patrick Brown, by the way. He has been formally barred just the other day from running for the party. And so I'm just curious about what is it about the GOP that they seemingly have a much harder time keeping their house in order compared to other center-right parties, including in the UK and my home country of Canada.
So I guess I was reading about both of these things. I think the main difference, we have so much more money here involved in our politics than other countries do. And I feel like the money kind of creates different factions. Whereas in other countries, I think it's just more central leadership. I think that the power structures that exist within our party structure, we have polling numbers, we have fancy political consultants, we've got all that going on. And also this Trump phenomenon of voters, they're afraid to lose that Trump base. And so I think that.
But you could argue Boris Johnson had his base of supporters. In fact, he claimed that was the source of his legitimacy.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I think that the establishment Republicans before Trump, they didn't really know what to do with the numbers after Trump. So I guess that's a similarity. That's a good point. But yeah, I would just say that there's so many factions within our party that nothing's centralized, but it's nice to see that Boris Johnson, he just got out. I mean, they were just like, we're done. That was like a day or two.
Yeah, for sure. And I just want to point out that, people who have been, looking for alternatives to Donald Trump, some of them, and in fact, many have been proposing people like Ron DeSantis and your own governor of Greg Abbott. They, on paper, they have a lot of, credentials that seem much more appealing than a person like Donald Trump. But if we dig deeper, we see that, both have pursued projects that in my opinion, reek of big government. Like if you're a small government conservative, then you might be troubled at the fact that DeSantis has been trying to punish corporations and individuals who've spoken out against his policies. And Greg Abbott, for his part, implemented strict checks on the border that I'm not sure what the reason was, but they did slow down, trucks and created a big bottleneck that must have had an effect on worsening the supply chain crisis. So I'm just curious, are they really the alternatives that we need if we're small government conservatives?
I would say no. So I guess full disclosure, I have worked for the Abbott campaign in multiple capacities. But I think Abbott particularly, he's kind of playing to the hard right now, and he's not something our country needs right now. I think a lot of people were looking at him a couple of years ago, but his leadership with the winter storm, especially here in Texas, and his kind of the executive power kind of getting out of control, like you mentioned. That's not small government. You're right. I think that, voters of Texas has decided that he's our governor, but I don't think that's going to play at a larger rate for our whole nation. DeSantis, yeah, I've been following a little bit of that, not as much as Abbott, of course. I think he's more diplomatic in his demeanor. He's not an entertainer personality like Trump is. But yeah, I mean, him punishing corporations, I mean, that's completely out of hand in my opinion too.
In fact, as a matter of fact, Jared Polis, the Democratic governor of Colorado, attacked him from the right on that. He basically called him a socialist on that.
Oh my God. Wow. That's,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
It's just like, you got to ask yourself, like, at one point, is this stuff just too far? And I think, going back to the money in our politics, he's looking for the clickbaits and the fundraising. He's not even looking to they're doing all this, like, placating people, when it's just, it makes them look like you guys are just, your power is out of control, really, is what it is.
And yeah, so. Speaking of Greg Abbott, I mean, I don't know what the current numbers are. Last I checked, I think about a year ago, Greg Abbott may have actually been the most unpopular governor in the country. I think now that's the governor of Oregon, but I think for a bit of time, it was the governor of Texas. I don't know what the numbers are now though, but last I checked, it was like a few points underwater.
Wow. I knew that he was up there, but I didn't know it was that bad. Yeah, I think right now, like, I don't think that his competition is going to be elected. I mean, I'm sure Abbott is going to get reelected. I don't know if you know this,
but that's obvious.
One point, yeah, at one point he had more money cash on hand than the Republican National Convention. So,
not surprised.
I mean, when you got that much money in the bank, you're kind of an untouchable person. Yeah. So I don't know.
Yeah, and
Abbott, you do. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I also may be wrong on this, but I've gotten the sense somewhere that Greg Abbott actually speaks Spanish, which has allowed him to, be able to talk directly with people in South Texas as well. So he kind of was gaining in that area before the Republicans did nationally.
Yeah. The Abbott campaign have done really just some very interesting, because of the amount of money that they have, they're able to do like significant research on that population. So they've been doing significant voter outreach on Hispanics in Texas. And I think you can look at Texas 34, whatever her name is,
Myra Flores.
Yes, Flores. So she, that kind of tells you where that's going. I ran a race in Texas 23 in 2020. And so that is a huge Hispanic district as well. Heavy Trump support down there.
Yeah, I believe it's one of two districts that flipped from Clinton to Trump.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy to look at. And so he does. So his wife is Hispanic, and so I think he anyways, he's done a phenomenal job as far as mobilizing and outreach on that population. Sure.
Yeah, and we forget sometimes that Latinos are more conservative than their voting patterns would suggest.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think that that's evidenced in so many different things. And that particular population, I mean, that has made or break a lot of races, especially here in Texas. So.
Anyway, I mean, we've talked a lot, at least certainly I have on my Twitter feed, about Republicans who have been running for office, that are sort of peddling this big lie. People like Doug Mastriano in Pennsylvania, who's the nominee for governor, Jim Marchant in Nevada, who's the nominee for Secretary of State, and there may be more like Blake Masters and Kari Lake in Arizona. But we should mention that Democrats have sometimes been boosting these candidates because they want to run against the worst Republican possible. And so I'm just, one of the things that I've been frustrated by, and some of my never Trump friends who basically become Democrats at this point, some of them may not fully understand this, is that we agree that that some of these Republicans could very well be existential threats to democracy. So it frustrates me to no end that Democrats are boosting them.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a huge problem. So I think a recent poll came out. I can't remember, it was Pew or something, right after a lot of the midterms, right after our midterms, especially. And it kind of just said, hey, like 30% of our party is about the big lie, right? So Democrats are going to make you think that that's over 50%. It's actually the majority, when it's actually just a pretty small percentage.
Of the party or of the population?
Of the party.
Wow.
Yeah, of the actual party. And so, but they're the loudest, and they're the ones that get TV time, of course. Marjorie Taylor Greene, she's great for Democrats. But I think if you look at, I know a couple of people that worked on the Youngkin race for Virginia. he's not a far right. He's like more
Not at all.
establishment. He was able to swing that and win Democrat votes. Another
Yeah.
one I think is Brian Kemp in
Brian Kemp.
yeah. So I mean, you just kind of see a trend that like, yeah, I mean, the Democrats are putting out this huge thing of all Republicans do or lies and conspiracy when no, I mean that's part of the story for sure, but it's not the full story.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I'm sort of like optimistic to see this happen because like a year ago, I was not that optimistic because okay, so you got like Glenn Youngkin, but hey, Virginia is one of the states that lets you nominate a convention rather than the primary. So maybe that was the whole reason that Glenn Youngkin won. But no, like there are Republicans like Brian Kemp who've been crushing in their primaries so far. And you know, in Colorado, you know, Democrats, you know, are favored, but they have some good Republican opponents now. So, you know, maybe the party sort of snap out of it. I've had friends sort of, you know, mentioning what they call the Glenn Youngkin effect, where like suburban Republicans have sort of been more enthusiastic about nominating like pragmatic and moderate conservatives, like instead of some of the wackos that were being nominated in 2018 and 2020.
exactly. And I also just think, you know, for anybody, a certain level of scandal is not going to last, except for Donald Trump, right? That doesn't apply. But look at Cawthorn, you know, he's done.
Yeah. But only because like the establishment finally decided to pile on him with everything they had. And even then it was still close.
Exactly. And I mean, I really see the Republican Party. I mean, we're two parties at this point, like, or more. Here in Texas, I kind of joke, I'm like, we're like 4 different levels, shades of red. So it's just pick your shade.
Yeah.
And I mean, here in Texas, like, because we are majority Republican, you know, everything is about the primary. So like the majority of races that I've worked at the state level, I mean, it's primary time. I mean, the general election is obviously does not matter unless you're in a swing district. So
just a quick question about that though. Greg Abbott's going to be fine. How do you see the race for attorney general at the moment?
Well, so I think that unfortunately, I'm not a supporter of Ken Paxton, that he will probably win because you're going to see that top of the ticket effect. So even though we eliminated straight ticket voting, I think people will just vote based on the R by the name. I mean,
yeah.
So I think that's what's going to happen. You know, I actually worked for the Branch campaign back in 2014, and we ran against Ken Paxton. So, you know, that guy has had problems for a long time.
Yep.
But unfortunately, the voters here in Texas, they don't pay attention to the AG's race. We're not paying attention to the lieutenant governor's race.
All they saw was the name next to George Bush's name, and they were like, yeah, let's go with Paxton.
I know, and I of course got out there and voted for Bush and supported Bush as much as
I was a Bush supporter, and I was a bit dismayed by that result. I'll admit, I might have cried a bit that night.
I know, it's kind of ridiculous, and he works really hard for it. Like he worked very hard for that, and I just was like, okay, maybe there's no hope for people paying attention to the runoff.
Yeah. Some of us were sort of pointing out, like at the very beginning, like Bush was kind of like trying to appeal for that Trump endorsement, and then he didn't get the endorsement.
No, he like went back and forth, I think, and then Trump said he was going to endorse them, and he made these koozies. I don't know if you saw the koozies that he was like, I'm the only Bush that Trump supports. You know, he really tried.
Yeah.
So,
I was actually a little bit curious because like I was actually thinking that maybe that Trump was not going to endorse Paxton, because I noticed at the very last day of his term, I'm not sure if what Paxton is accused is a federal crime, but I actually noticed he was not among those who got a pardon at the end of Trump's term. So I was actually curious maybe if that means he was actually going to angle for somebody else in that primary.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you would think. And I mean, Paxton is just yeah.
And actually, I actually am curious, like to know, like, should there be like some reform to the pardon power? Should it be like the president can only pardon someone once they've actually been convicted? Like they should just stop preemptive pardons. Yeah,
I don't know. That's a good question. I actually haven't thought a whole lot about that, but that's something I should probably do some research on for sure.
Yeah. Anyway, you want to do a lightning round on the issues, or I don't know, like lightning round, but more like we'll go through stuff we've discussed talked about before one by one.
Yeah, sure.
So let's talk about the Bidenflation. What can Biden do? Because like that's often something I hear a lot is that they talk about Biden being blamed like for inflation, but I'm just not sure what can they do. So what can they do?
So honestly, okay, I'm not an expert in finance. I'm not an expert in economics, but I do know one thing. Obviously, a government can always pursue is their monetary policy with their Federal Reserve. When you have too much money out in the economy, that creates inflation. So that is one contributing factor. I think we as conservatives would say, hey, let's do the most we can. I mean, I'm also not of the opinion, hey, this is all Biden's fault, of course. I mean,
right.
I think he's just more complacent in the matter.
And I should also point out that here in Canada, as in a lot of the world, there is also inflation.
Yes, exactly.
It is a global phenomenon. Some places are worse than others, like say Turkey, where
right.
I should point out the president of Turkey has actually been has more political influence in their country's central bank, and he's been pushing for very low interest rates, which based on my understanding of economics is a bad thing to do when you have inflation.
Yeah. So I mean, there's good moves, there's bad moves, there's kind of mitigating situation. But I know that Biden doesn't have full power of that. So
yeah. And I mean, I don't know what it's like where you are, but I've been hearing anecdotes of after rising gas prices that they're actually starting to tick down a little bit.
Yeah, I actually need to check this week, but I looked and I think gas was like 15 cents cheaper or something.
Yeah.
Here.
Yeah, I think it peaked at like $2.13 a liter where I am, although that's Canadian money, so keep that in mind. But I think it might starting to tick down as well here, but I have to check.
Yeah, well, let's hope that it's going down. Yeah, I feel like I wish I had more answers, but I'm not an economist.
But let's talk about the other elephant in the room that's in charge of that's rather causing the big spike in gas prices, and that is what's going on over on the other side of the world in Ukraine. I don't know about you, but you are talking to an out and proud neocon. So what should we be doing, if anything, to make sure that Ukraine can win this fight?
So yes, I'm fully supportive of supporting the people of Ukraine. I think it's complex problem because they're not a NATO country, right? So
right.
Are we going to get in? Are we going to cause World War III?
And I also apologize for putting you on the spot and making you solve inflation and Ukraine on the same night.
It's okay. But I am a fellow neocon. I mean, I believe that we should be involved too, for sure. I think I don't know if you saw this. I think Putin he said something crazy 2 days ago. It's shocking. The guy is crazy.
He said a lot of crazy things.
He was like, I'm going to invade Alaska. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't believe him, but
I just assumed that the moment Russian troops step on Alaskan soil, America blows them the kingdom come.
Yeah, and you want to go against Sarah Palin and all the guns over there?
Yeah, and also, what bridge do they cross? They didn't finish that bridge.
I know. So.
Yeah, and in addition to asking you to solve inflation and Ukraine, I'm also going to ask you to solve immigration and healthcare. But let's start with immigration. Is our immigration system good? Is there any changes that should be made? Because I had gotten the sense, my beef with Trump has been that as someone who supports humane enforcement of American immigration laws, I feared that with the way that Trump was going about it, that it would mean that people like me would be tarnished by saying, well, hey, maybe we should enforce the laws on our books humanely. And then they'll say, oh, you support kids in cages, you support separating families. No, but that's the thing that that's the brush we get stroked with because of that.
Yeah, so that's a complex issue. So I actually spent all last semester working in immigration clinic and law school to try to go after this issue and try to learn more about it, because it's a complex issue, just that. Yeah, I think that sorry, I'm referring to my notes.
Right.
Yeah, I believe both sides of the narratives here, the left and the right, there is true facts on both sides. I believe conservatives, they're not wrong when people are saying they're actually walking across the border at large numbers. I mean, they are doing that.
But it is worth noting that the majority of unauthorized immigration is through visa overstay from Central America rather than from Mexico.
Yes, For sure. So there's a lot of visa overstays. There's a lot of people just overstaying, their education,
Right.
their work permits, whatever the situation may be. I mean, I definitely see that. But I will say, I mean, I saw firsthand people at our clinic that had literally just walked over. So,
Right.
so I guess like, and especially here in Texas, I think that's different here in Texas because we're a border state. So I think we kind of take facts from both sides and put it together. I don't
Right.
have all of the answer to immigration other than the fact I think it's very broke. And I just feel like there's no political will to fix it on either side of the aisle. And I think that it was interesting when the Biden administration, all they did is reinstate the stay in Mexico policy from the Trump administration.
And wait,
And
okay, I want to clarify that. Did they? Because like what I thought they were trying to cancel it, but a court they tried to block them in court to do that, and now the court said, "Hey, yeah, you can cancel it."
yeah, so at first they implemented it, and then it went to the courts, and it's kind of been a back and forth thing for them. But yeah, at first they didn't have an answer, so they implemented it, and I believe it is in the court now. Right, you said. But yeah,
Didn't the Supreme Court just rule on it? Like, wasn't that one of the last cases of the term or something like that? There was I thought I remember.
Not that I'm aware. Not, I mean, I could be wrong. I've been studying. I've been studying a lot, so sometimes I catch things, but I could be wrong. I don't remember, but I feel like it was a higher.
Last week.
It was a higher circuit, I guess. So
okay.
I don't know. I would look that up, but I feel like it's just like I don't really feel like they have answers for the immigration policy, the current administration.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes we have this big ideas like just like big like that sound good, but are unworkable, like a wall from coast to coast. And
right.
I guess I might as well just say I don't have a problem with a wall in various points. But I think it should take into account the topography of the border. I don't necessarily think a border is going to work for the Texas portion of the border because of the Rio Grande.
Right.
Yeah.
So you might have small sections where that works, but also, Trump coming in and saying, "Hey, I've got this immigration policy. I'm just going to build a wall." Well, there's a little bit more to that.
Right. And, I mean, it's good if you have like a wall, although mind you would be expensive, but a wall is useless if you don't have people.
Right. So building a wall, I don't think is the answer. It might be the answer in like a few pockets of the border. But, I don't know if you've seen these videos, cartel's pretty extravagant. They build extravagant tunnels. So once again, I don't know how the wall is going to play out.
Yeah, that's something I've actually been wondering. Why won't the United States and Mexico maybe go on like, I've thought about this, about the United States and Mexico doing a joint military operation to dislodge the cartels from the territories that they control, because there's like entire parts of Mexico where like you call the police, they could be literally outgunned and outmanned by the cartels. So that sounds like something that the United States and Mexico could cooperate on, is combating them.
Yeah. No, they could do that. It's, from what I understand, just like working at an immigration clinic, I mean, they kind of run the show overall, but I mean, the US, I mean, that could be one answer, right?
Right.
I haven't really thought about it like that. I just see the effect that they're having on the population, which is horrible. I mean, they're horrible. So,
right. And I guess I'll just say, like, my own personal experience, like as a student who studied in the United States, is that, there's a great visa system that basically allows for people to study in the United States. What the legal immigration system is bad at is keeping those highly educated people here once you've educated them. That was a problem that's one of the reasons why I came back home, was there really wasn't a way that I could stay and pursue a career in the United States. So, I kind of went home for that reason, and I'm kind of coming back because I'm getting married. So that kind of, that's the whole thing, is that America's system is more based on family reunification rather than skills based, like our system is.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. I did not.
Yeah, many countries like Canada and Australia have something called a point system, where people are rewarded for the skills and the level of education and job experience that they have. Because that's sort of where our system is based on, is getting people from across the world who are highly skilled and having them contribute to our economies in that way.
Definitely. And I know European countries are like that too, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
So Yeah, I mean, I wish that I guess I overall just wish that the powers that be, both parties, would even think about implementing something like that. I'm sure there's bills out there, but the political will to get it passed is something else. So,
Yeah, for sure.
anyways,
Now
I don't know if
let's.
I was too helpful on that or not.
Oh no, for sure. And I'll let's solve healthcare while we're at it.
Okay.
I'm just curious because you might remember this, but a couple of years ago, Heath Mayo actually put out like a series of articles talking about what a conservative healthcare system looks like. And one of the things that I feel like has been the big problem with the Republicans is that for a long time on the issue of healthcare, we've been the party of no. We've kind of ceded the
Right.
debate to the left on that issue, and as a result, they've sort of defined it. And that's why we have things like Medicare for all in the mainstream. Which, speaking as someone who comes from a country that has a system like that, it's not what it's choked up to be. We wait a long time for healthcare, and there are people I've heard horror stories of people who sometimes will get a cancer diagnosis and then they'll be asked to come back in 3 months for treatment. They may be matched with a bone marrow donor, but have to wait for 3 months because they're on the wait list. By the time they come back, it's metastasized and they're terminal. And so, that's sort of and I should point out, people in Canada who are rich and who can afford it go to the US for treatment. So, there are actually things I think in some ways Canada can learn from the US in terms of the way our healthcare system works. So I'm just curious, what does a conservative healthcare system look like?
So, so I did a little bit of work with the Texas Public Policy Foundation, and they have a Right on Healthcare division. I do need to read Heath Mayo's, but I don't know exactly. I haven't read enough about what he has to say. But so with Texas Public Policy Foundation, they started talking about direct primary care, which might be what Heath Mayo is talking about. I'm not sure, but basically it's pay as you go healthcare. It's either a subscription to a hospital. It's hey, here's a menu of things that we offer, and you can just pay cash here, making it more affordable. Kind of using the free market healthcare idea. I think on paper it looks good. I think that like in plan, I don't know what that does for people that just can't afford it as much. I mean, if you need a liver transplant and it costs $8,000, there needs to kind of be something for that. The government should be able to help you. So,
Right.
but I think it works in some circumstances and it doesn't work in others. But
Right. And more what Heath I think was talking about was one of his big ideas was to do two things to sort of lower the cost of healthcare. One, increase the supply. In fact, I think during like COVID, I think in some ways some hospitals were able to sort of temporarily increase capacity. I was very much of the opinion that expansion should have been permanent. That whatever expansions that were necessary for COVID, they should have kept going full time. The other was to lower the demand by, it would be things like giving incentives to people to eat right, exercise, quit smoking, and get vaccinated.
For sure. I mean, I'm all in favor of that. I feel like our society, especially here in America, there's really just no incentive to be healthy. Like you look around you, that's a conversation that you kind of have to reach by yourself. But I also think that here, I mean, it's the insurance companies that run everything. It's not even the doctors. It's not the nurses. It's an insurance thing, and the insurance lobby controls the industry. And so once we take that component out, maybe we can actually address all these other things. And either we can add more government like the Democrats want, or we can take away government. But until we address the insurance issue and how insurance controls everything, like it's really hard to have an answer on that.
Yeah, I mean, to me, like the big thing that I think a lot of people would like to see that is the idea that if you have like you're scared that you might be having a heart attack and you call an ambulance and you get checked out, that shouldn't like land you with a $3,000 bill. Like,
oh, for sure.
Yeah. But I mean, so I think that there are ways that America can learn from Canada. I think there are ways Canada can learn from America. I think that in some ways we can learn from each other on that, because there are countries across the world that seem to get universal health care right without any of the problems that our system has, like say the UK or Israel. Some of these countries know how to get that right. So I guess we should talk about the other elephant in the room. There's been a lot of elephants in the room tonight, but
Lots of elephants.
but one of them is the issue of abortion, where we just had that big ruling. I think you and I are both pro-life. I just want to, just curious to talk about this, because I mean, I've always supported the right to life, but I've also supported the right to life for the mother. I don't think a mother should have to die because from pregnancy. I think that if her life is in danger and the child's life can be saved, I think her life should take precedence. But I guess I've also sort of just been asking, like, because we have the availability of these abortion pills, no one has really explained to me how exactly the government would enforce like something like that, without violating, say, the Fourth Amendment, or prosecuting women who cross state lines. Like, that would be like a violation of the full faith and credit clause, according to my understanding. And so I just have been starting to come to the opinion that when it comes to like first trimester pill abortions, that that's really going to have to, there's only so much the state can do, and it's going to come down to communities, like, and being able to this is in some ways, in my opinion, a reclaiming of the term reproductive justice that you often hear on the left. But to me, reproductive justice is making it more affordable to give birth than to abort.
100%. And I think if Republicans are going to take away, take away Roe, then they need to step it up on the healthcare side. They need to step up housing for people, because the majority of people seeking abortions, I think it's because they can't afford their children. And it's horrible that you would have to make that decision. But at the same time, like, let's try to take care of the kids that are going to come into this world, because you're taking away that. So I think that's an issue. And then like I said, I've got family and friends on both sides, so I get it. I think, like, me as a law student, staying on the legal side is kind of where I've been seeing this. The way our law here in Texas, it creates a lot of problems for the courts, and I'm worried about district attorneys and the enforcement of the crime, enforcement of the criminal penalties. You've got the law of parties here in Texas, where it's just like you're creating basically like anybody assisting with abortions are going to be held liable. And so I guess I'm worried about like how that's going to look and impact our courts and frivolous lawsuits too.
And I would also say, like, if you're going to have like a ban on abortion, it ideally should have been written in 2022 rather than 1925.
No kidding. And I think Texas right now, from what I hear from the legal scholars, they're like, you guys have no exception for rape or incest, which I'm like, that's just absolutely ridiculous. So I think the first thing the Texas legislature needs to do is go in and make some of these exceptions and make it more amenable to the situation. We cannot go based on 1925. If we're going to do this, we have to create a lot of other things too.
Yeah, and one of those things I would say is fixing the adoption and foster care system. I've heard Texas may be near the bottom on terms of that.
Oh, I'm sure we are. And I think birth control is another thing. I don't know if you saw this a couple of years ago. Ted Cruz and AOC joint authored a bill on birth control being over the counter. And I'm like,
that's a great idea.
Why can't we do birth control over the counter? Exactly. If we're going to do this, we need to make contraceptives more prevalent. And
I guess I should also take this opportunity to point out, and it's possible that you and I might disagree on this, but I'm actually of the opinion that the idea that there should be no state sanctioned violence, in my opinion, means that not only would I be against abortion, I'm also against the death penalty and euthanasia. To me, those are all examples of state sanctioned violence, which or state sanctioned murder, which I'm generally not. I very much am not supportive, even if the person is done something so horribly that they're deserving of that. I especially think that when you actually look into individual cases and you see the possibilities that the people that the state have executed may have very well have been innocent, like, I just don't trust the government to get that right at all.
No, I would agree, and I follow the Innocence Project pretty consistently. There was a case here in Texas. So I don't know, you probably know, here in Texas, we put more people to death than a lot of other states. So I'm personally not a huge fan of the death penalty, but obviously it's not up to me. And I think if people choose to be pro-life, that's great. You need to be pro-life from womb to tomb. So, if you're going to do the thing, then do the thing all the way. Don't say, yeah, we're going to kill people. I don't think the government should have the right to kill people. And it's, like you said, it's an imperfect system. So we have people sitting on death row. The other arguments,
Yeah.
like,
And it's also like, we trust the government, we don't trust the government to sort of, get a lot of things right as small government conservatives, like, welfare payments and regulation, everything like that, but we somehow trust them to execute an innocent person and get that right.
right. I mean, I don't trust it either, right?
Yeah.
So, and I also think that people don't understand. They're like, oh, well, if you just if they die on death row, it's cheaper than keeping them in prison. Actually, it's not. The appeals process takes a lot more money.
Yeah.
So that's going to cost a lot more money for them to be on death row. And so, in my opinion, life sentence in prison is death row.
Yeah.
You're dying, but it's slow.
And why give them a quick exit? Like make them
right.
make them stay in prison for the rest of their lives and live that out. But I guess let's also move on, because you mentioned AOC, who has been a proponent of the Green New Deal. Boo. But I would like to talk about the whole issue of climate change and energy. These two, in my opinion, go together. But to me, it comes back to the idea of a shared reality, because, in my opinion, it is possible to acknowledge, for us conservatives to acknowledge that climate change is real, and also point out the flaws in many of the proposals that some have proposed to tackle it. And I'll tell you from personal experience, I have been in circles like on the right where, even here in Canada, where, just even the basic fact of acknowledging that, climate change is happening, it's regarded as, oh, well, you support the Green New Deal, when, well, no, I don't, but I just happen to think that it is happening, but, to me, it's like that whole idea of a shared reality. And I just wonder, this is like the whole healthcare issue, is that we've sort of ceded the debate to the left. But it's actually on this issue that I'm a bit more optimistic about, maybe we're actually taking it seriously, and we're actually, being able to enter the conversation and saying, well, yeah, it's happening, but, here are the problems with some of the things they're proposing. Here are some of the issues. Here's some of the proposals we have.
Right. And I also think there's also just an age difference within our party. I think young conservatives, they're not in denial about the climate. I think people and millennials, what in a few years, we'll be able to change the conversation of the party, right? So I think that's optimistic when it comes to the environment. I personally would call myself, try to be pro as the environment as possible. But I think that the activists do a lot of damage. I was talking to my brother earlier in California. Activism shut down a plant, but now you've allowed fossil fuels to take over. So yeah. Democrats are only causing more harm. It doesn't even make sense.
Yeah,
what they're doing.
Yeah.
I mean, they're yelling and screaming, but they're still allowing.
Yeah, there was there's been a red flag meme that was going along, and one of my favorite red flag meme quotes was, I support green energy, but I don't support nuclear. Red flag.
Red flag.
Yeah, no, I mean, my view, I think, is that I feel like what's ultimately going to happen is fossil fuels in the short term, nuclear in the medium term, maybe renewables in the long term.
Yes.
That's where I see ultimately things going. But, I especially think in the short term, fossil fuels are a necessary part of, I think, what an energy policy looks like. And particularly, if we're going to have oil and gas, I want it to be Western oil and gas.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
we shouldn't be going to the Saudis, right?
Or the Russians.
Right. So
yeah.
And that's a hard conversation that Democrats don't seem to see. I mean, why would we rely on our enemies for our for fuel?
Alberta could probably fuel the West's energy needs.
Yeah, that's a good point. So yeah, I really like how you put that. Fossil in the short term, renewable in the long term. What did you say? Nuclear
in the medium term.
In the medium term. I think that's really well said. Actually, I think you should publish something on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also just don't like how the Biden administration is oh, just go out and buy a Tesla. I mean, what? I mean, most people just can't afford to do that.
Right.
Once again,
even though Teslas are getting cheaper, they're still expensive.
Right. And I mean, I hopefully, as a practicing lawyer can go out and do that. But I mean, most people can't do that.
Right.
And so I think,
and even though I don't drive yet, but I do want my first car to be a Tesla. But it's not always possible if you live in rural Indiana, where there might not be the infrastructure to support that type of stuff.
Right. I mean, even so you got to plan out your trips everywhere you go, especially here in Texas. You know, Bucky's actually just implemented the Tesla station. So I don't know
Nice.
if you're a fan of Bucky's, but so
I don't know if
that's
we have Buc-ee's here. I think that's an American thing.
it's a Texan thing, and
Oh,
they just got one in Tennessee, so it's mainly a
nice.
Texan thing.
Georgia's actually near Tennessee. It's a couple where I'm living is a couple hours from Chattanooga.
Oh yeah, I think a Bucky's might be on the way. You should check out the new one. They just opened it like 2 weeks ago. So.
Nice. I'd love to, especially if I ever want to take a weekend up to Nashville. I know where to stop and plug in. Now this
Highly recommend Nashville. My parents live in Nashville, so I go up
nice.
there a lot. I'm actually going
Yeah,
back.
I wanted to, if I was going to be a musician, because I sing a little bit, I thought about maybe pursuing moving to Nashville and pursuing a career there, but life's taken a different turn for me.
Understandable. Yeah. Well, that's how it happens. But yeah, I mean, the Democrats have able to take over the conversation, I think, but their tactics are not.
Yeah,
they're not really.
yeah. In my opinion, when the Republicans stop being the party of no, that's when we actually start having a productive conversation.
That's a really good way. That's a good way to put it. Yeah. And like I said, I think the narrative will change once millennials and people get older. I mean, there's just such a difference. Like, I mean, you look at we're supposed to be the big tent party, right? Mm-hmm. Well, people my parents' age, they're like, oh no to LGBT stuff. Well, why would you say no to that? That's more votes. And
you mentioned that because I personally am of the opinion that there are two types of people that I believe that the party needs in our coalition: LGBT conservatives, as well as people who may not want to participate in a same-sex wedding themselves, but respect the right of others to get married, for themselves. That's generally where I stand. So I feel like both types of people are needed in the party.
100%. And I was thinking about your question, just going back to making room for both on your question that you sent. So I think we can do that, and we can kind of meet in the middle. I think that obviously the state can support whatever they want, but when it comes to religious freedom and religious rights, we have pastor protection laws. And so I feel like it's a win-win for everyone.
Exactly.
As far as same-sex weddings go, I don't see why people are still complaining about that part. But yeah, I mean, separation of church and state. So great, go to the county clerk and get married,
Right. We were also talking about that whole thing of separation of church and state because there was a couple big rulings that I don't know if I'm personally on the free exercise side of that debate. So I cheered those two rulings that happened. I'm of the opinion the state shouldn't tell you, you can't, practice your religion. And I'm actually a big fan of school choice programs that don't exclude religious schools. And it's actually worth noting that in my home province of Ontario, it's actually the only province, because for historical reasons, we have publicly funded public and Catholic schools, but no other religious denomination, whether Jewish, Muslim, Sikh, or evangelical, gets publicly funded. So, that's a bit of an anomaly, and the political will is just not there to change that. But I like how in the United States, they're now saying, especially because some of these provisions in the past in the US that basically only funded secular private schools, from what I hear, originally they were intended specifically to discriminate against Catholic schools. So in some ways, I think that's progress, that there's no religious discrimination in these programs anymore.
Yeah, no, that's good to hear about that. I didn't know that's how Canada worked, but
yep.
I think personally, if we're gonna do non-discrimination for Christians, that should apply to Muslims, Jewish people.
For sure.
It needs to apply across the board, free exercise.
And so I'd say most conservatives actually agree on that, from what I've been seeing.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe as our country as a whole, but Texas voters are one thing, right? So I've heard a lot of, I'm like, well, I get it. I consider myself a Christian as well, but it's got to apply to Muslims in the same way.
For sure.
I don't think religion should be forced on anyone.
Exactly.
And you should be able to free exercise freely, for sure.
And I mean, I just, on one more issue I'd like to talk about, there's actually a possibility that I might be disagreeing with you from the right based on what I saw in your Twitter feed.
Oh, okay.
But it's the issue of entitlements. And I kind of lump under that Social Security and Medicare. You point out it's not entitlements, but the way I see it, it's money that's sort of going to people. And I think many of us who are conservative, who are millennials, I think many of us are pessimistic that those things are going to be around by the time we retire, because from what I hear, I think one of the programs was supposed to run out of money this year, but I'm not sure. But then I have to check that again. But I think there's just a worry that because of the amount of money that's sort of going out to these programs, and the fact that the number of workers is going to decrease over the next 10 years, that there's just not going to have enough money for people, like for the time that we come around for us to retire. So one of the things that I would support is raising the retirement age so that people like us retire at, say, 70. And in my opinion, if you're making like millions of dollars, you shouldn't get that check. Like, you don't need it. That just is my opinion. And I'm just curious about, where you stand on that. Cause I that may be one thing we might disagree on.
I don't know. I've seen a lot of things, so I don't feel like I have a strong belief on that. I feel like if you've worked in the system, you can get out. But I mean, I hear what you're saying too. I mean, if Elon Musk does not need a social security check, yes. So I hear that argument.
I like Elon Musk, but he doesn't need that check.
No, there's no way. And I mean, there's plenty of people that I know that they're not Elon Musk, but they don't need that. They have investments and whatnot. And so, but I also am of the opinion, kind of like, for the majority of Americans who put in the hours and the work, like we should get it. But here's where I kind of stand is like, I don't trust it to be there. I think they've been saying that they're going to run out for a lot of years, but I mean, the boomers, my parents, God bless them. I really think that, it might actually not be there for us, and we're just going to have to figure it out by ourselves, put money aside, figure out how to retire. I mean, I feel like that's going to be the reality for our generation.
Yep. So. I sometimes wonder, because I remember that whole debate in 2000, I actually watched a video of the debate where Al Gore basically said the word "blockbox" probably 7 times. There was an SNL skit where he just kept saying the phrase "lockbox" over and over again. But to me, that's maybe what they should have done instead of just using it for other stuff like they might have done, from what I've read. It's just crazy, just how these sort of basic systems just don't work, and when they're supposed to, and it's like I said, I think many of us, I think, we'll have to save our own money, and I think we should have more freedom to do that. There are countries around the world like Brazil that have also done pension reform. France, they tried to get to it, but it didn't work. But I think that's sort of, I think what has to happen is some of us, we're going to have to eventually just take charge of our own retirement. The state can't do everything. It's like, as a small government conservative, just the state can't do everything. You're nodding. We agree on that.
No, I agree. I think that it's also just kind of the reality of the government's not going to really be there for you. Even if you have the ideology, coming from socialism, it sounds great on paper, it just sounds great, but it's just not practical. And I think once people have experiences in life and they kind of just see, hey, the government, it actually doesn't work, it's not efficient, and our system in play don't work, you really kind of do have to figure it out by yourself.
And that's one of the reasons why I think, with the rise of Bernie Sanders, why people who are maybe of Cuban, Venezuelan, Nicaraguan, or Vietnamese descent, why many of them may have soured on the Democrats because of the rise of Bernie Sanders. Because they.
Yeah, I mean, he's a populist just like Trump is.
Right. And because, we talk about socialism, like a theoretical concept, as to why things don't work. But for many of them, it's a lived reality.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
And a lot of those people, I also feel like when people say socialism is good for small countries like Iceland, but how are you going to apply that to a large country like the US? And also the people who advocate, I've seen people, who
when they say socialism, they'll say, oh, we're talking about the Scandinavian countries. Well, many of them are not willing to make a clear distinction between Scandinavia and Venezuela. Like they sometimes like talk
Right.
about them as if they're the same, when, I think that if progressives like were to clearly distinguish between Scandinavia and Venezuela, they may have more success. Not everyone will agree, but obviously you and I have different ideas about what because we're small government conservatives. But I think progressives, if you're watching, if you make a clear distinction between Venezuela and Scandinavia, you may have more success at convincing people.
Man, that's a good thing. I need to write that down. Yeah, it works some places. I'm not going to disagree. I've heard a lot of people say, hey, well, it looks like it's really working in Germany. Well, guess what? Germany is smaller than Texas. We got a bigger
inland, I think.
Inland, but I'm just saying, our economy is the 7th largest in the world. We have a lot of people here. We got a lot of things going on. What works over there might not work for our population.
Right. And, I love talking about these issues, by the way. I feel like whenever more stuff comes up like this, I'd love to have you back, but I have one more question I would like to ask you.
Okay.
Is there anything you've seen, in the past little bit that's given you reason for optimism about the direction that our country or political discourse is heading in?
I honestly wish that I could say there were more things, but I did search when you sent me this question. I think when you see times of trouble, you really kind of see people rise to the occasion and real good leaders come out of that. So I guess I'm optimistic about the potential for that, not just political leaders, business leaders, education leaders in science. I think right now, the bar is pretty low. I feel like we're millennials are doing the bare minimum of taking a picture on the internet, posting to Instagram, and going out for the weekend. That's kind of what people are concerned about. And so if that's the threshold, then surely there can be some leadership. And so I guess I'm just looking for people that are not alienating, people that are not aggressive and divisive. I'm looking for people that unite rather than hate. I know great Democrats that I've worked with here in Texas. I also know really divisive ones. I know great Republicans. I also know really divisive ones. So I try to look at the person and not the party right now. And I guess I'm just optimistic, and I'm kind of optimistic. Maybe a third party will rise up. I'm kind of a fan of Andrew Yang a little bit. Yeah. So
Andrew Yang is sort of, I was just distracted a little bit, but I'm now just registering that. But Andrew Yang is a very interesting, type of person. And he's the kind of person who I think on most issues I would disagree with, but every now and then he actually says something like, yeah, he kind of has that, it's weird. He has that mindset that I would sort of see eye to eye on, but on almost no issue would I agree with him on.
Yeah, well, I think it's just the idea of fresh ideas. I feel like we as conservatives, we're kind of running out of, we got the same thing going on. Democrats hate what we're saying. I feel like Trump is divisive. Right. I get it.
Yeah, and many ways Republicans,
Democrats all the.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, sorry, you go ahead.
To say Republicans in many ways are sort of like the anti-Andrew Yang, because they talk in a divisive way, even though I agree with them on many issues. They talk in a way that kind of may alienate people like us.
Yeah, and I still consider myself a conservative, but I just look at Andrew Yang and I'm like, I think why I like him is he's adapting to the future. He talks about AI, he talks about computer programming taking over a lot of jobs. Well, that happens to probably be a reality that the Republicans need to face, the Democrats need to face. And nobody's talking about that, Yeah. So I guess I'm just optimistic for new ideas. And when I look at him, I'm like, yeah, he's got new ideas.
Maybe we need to relitigate the natural born citizen clause and then form a unity ticket between him and Elon Musk.
Oh, yeah. Him and Elon Musk. Great. Yeah. Crazy. Yeah. Politics is crazy right now. I hope I provide you some sort of insight. I'm not working in the field and I haven't in the last 2 years, so I don't feel like my opinions. I'm usually writing, either press releases or something. I'm used to being very involved. And I'm sorry I had to make you fact check. I don't have that stuff off the top of my head.
Fine.
But yeah, hopefully it was helpful, and I enjoyed talking about it for sure.
Yeah, and let everyone know where they can follow you on, or where to follow you.
Oh yeah, my Twitter handle is Lauren Cott, LaurenCott. And yeah, I would just say looking for hoping to be optimistic about the future here in Texas and about in the US. So
As we should all. Lauren, thank you so much for coming on the show. We'll see you next time.
okay. Okay, you guys have a good one.